say a plane like ours weighs roughly the same as a Tesla Semi, an electric truck. It carries roughly the same amount of batteries. It has the same system voltage. It has the same power electronics. We're going to be using a lot of the same components, but the sort of cost for a plane versus something like that is 2 orders of magnitudes higher. So, which means that there's so much opportunity to bring these costs down.
Hello, I'm Bryony Worthington, and this is Cleaning Up. My guest this week is Anders Forslund, CEO of Heart Aerospace, the Swedish airplane developers who've recently established an R&D facility in California to develop their 30-seater hybrid electric plane. Later this year, their all-electric prototype will take to the skies in its first test flight. Aviation accounts for around 2 to 3% of global emissions, and it's showing no sign of decreasing. There's been a lot of focus on replacement fuels, but as yet there's been no real paradigm shift in the industry. Anders has a plan to change that. We met in person in Los Angeles, a city starting to open and rebuild after devastating wildfires leveled roughly 63 square miles of the city, claiming at least 25 lives. And while on the other side of the country, President Trump was signing executive orders to repeal federal support measures designed to tackle climate change. While there are a number of companies innovating in the aerospace sector, including Joby Aviation, who we featured in episode 156, Heart is targeting larger planes and longer routes. They already have orders to buy hundreds of planes, most notably from United Airlines, and have received early investment from Bill Gates' Breakthrough Energy Ventures. I wanted to ask Anders about his company, the sector more generally, and how he's feeling about the coming years. Please join me in welcoming Anders Forslund to Cleaning Up. Anders, thank you for inviting me to Heart Aerospace to interview you today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. And I was just wondering if you could start with our usual question, which is introducing yourself in your own words, please.
So my name is Anders Forslund. I'm co-founder and CEO of Heart Aerospace. And I'm my background is I love planes. Have since I was a kid. Got my education actually sort of moving from back to forth. I got my PhD in aerospace product development. I was a researcher at MIT on jet engines. Before that, I did my master's in space technology and physics, bachelor's in engineering physics, and really into planes, like building stuff. And after a while, working in parallel in the legacy aerospace industry, we started this company, and it's been 6 years now, and we're approaching the first flight of our aircraft.
Amazing. And tell us a little bit about what makes the Heart Aerospace plane special.
It's the first commercial aircraft that is, designed to operate for airlines that is hybrid electric. So it represents a paradigm shift that we haven't really seen in this industry since we went to the jet age, right? And it's also, not only is it the first hybrid electric aircraft, and we're going to talk obviously more about why that's important, but it's also the first time in 12 years in the Western world that we see a new clean sheet aircraft design being rolled out and flight tested and then being entered into service.
Excellent. And so just to bring that to life for people, when you say hybrid electric, I think perhaps most people would maybe most commonly think of maybe the Prius as a car. Is it similar to that?
Our mission is to sort of decouple. We talk about decarbonization and marketization of air travel, and air travel is, we think, one of the greatest inventions out there. It really is something that's a force for good in our society and our civilization, but it's tightly coupled to emissions. So we have two things happen this year. First of all, aviation commercial air travel passed the threshold of being $1 trillion market, but it's also emitting about 1 gigaton of CO2, which means that for every dollar you spend on, say, an aircraft ticket, that's 1 kilogram of CO2. So it's this really interesting 1-to-1 ratio, and that's the industry emissions and the industry revenue. Like this, they've been tightly linked for the past decades. And so, and as we're seeing that we're sort of stagnating a little bit on what we can do in terms of optimizing the jet engine technology. So the only way to break this pattern is to find a way to decouple that. And obviously electrification is the solution. Now, our aircraft is hybrid electric, but it has the opportunity to fly, or is designed to fly routes that are up to 200 kilometers, 125 miles, initially, and then as batteries progress, fly even longer. But the reason it's hybrid is that we can also fly longer routes, 800 kilometers, 500 miles, but also needed for reserves. So if you build an electric car and you run out of battery, it sort of can pull off to the side of the road. Whereas if you have a plane, you need an runway, and about 1 in every 1,000 flights in the U.S. gets diverted to a different place. And if you want to carry batteries for that 1 in 1,000 contingency, you end up with a very excessively heavy plane that has a really bad performance. So instead, you build a small hybrid system on the aircraft to allow you to fly, to meet those reserve requirements and fly the longer routes. And that's sort of there for safety, redundancy, but it's the core of the aircraft is sort of electric, and the all electric value proposition, the zero emissions use case. So it's not really like a Prius. It's more, you and I talked about it, is more like I understand the sort of the black cabs of London, really, yeah.
Yeah. And just we've got the picture of the actual plane here behind us, and it's a propeller plane, full propellers, and the systems are separated, right? So as I understand it, do you want to talk to us about that?
Yeah, so we looked, we looked a lot at the different systems of doing this, and there was a bunch of sort of design criteria that we looked at. So this hybrid system for the short routes will be used only once in every 1,000 flights, and so you want to build a system that can use off-the-shelf components, that you don't have to spend a lot of development for the hybrid system. So we came up with this concept we call the independent hybrid. So the inboard engines are 2 electric motors. The outboard motors the outboard propellers are 2 turboprop engines, and they are off for the short flights, and they're feathered, which means that the propellers are positioned in a way that they're not actually adding drag. So you're flying with the inboard motors alone for the short flights, and then you turn these things on in midair, basically, if you have a contingency, or if you want to fly further, which means that you can use off-the-shelf turboprop engines that are like smaller, inexpensive for a large aircraft, and you can focus on the development of the electric system.
And the switching between the two.
Yeah, switching between the two. And while that is, an operation, it's not very high resolution, so sometimes you have very complex hybrid systems with gearboxes and millisecond accuracy and all of these failure cases. Here's sort of you keep these systems independent, which makes it much easier to control.
And to regulate.
Yeah, to regulate, yeah.
And so, because obviously aviation's got a bit of a reputation as being a very inefficient way of traveling, but actually once you're up in the air, the big expenditure of energy is to get yourself off the ground and into the air. Once you're up there, it doesn't require that much energy, right? To then keep yourself going, and then coming down, you're using virtually no energy.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually quite astounding given the speeds that we can travel at with aircraft, that it's not, it's actually on par with things like, driving a car with 2 people and stuff like that. So the beautiful thing about aviation is that, whereas if you look at, a car, you have the manufacturing footprint of, having a 2-ton vehicle or 3-ton vehicle with tons of batteries being built for you. And you also have the road. So I only know this figure for Sweden, but in Sweden, it's about 200 meters of road for every car. So if you think about what's the ecosystem that I'm buying, what's my buy-in for a car, it's not only the car itself, it's 200 meters of road that needs to be managed. And the same thing with trains. A large part of the tickets for trains are being subsidized for the maintenance of the tracks, right? So aviation has this unique opportunity. You don't need roads, you don't need rail, you only need a small strip of runway, and we're actually can operate from quite small runways. So this has the opportunity to be the fastest, the most affordable, and also obviously the greenest form of travel.
But it does require iteration, right? Because
Yeah.
at 125 miles, I'm just trying to think in my world of, going up to, say, Tahoe.
Yeah.
You drive, there's no rail infrastructure, but that's beyond the range of 125 miles.
So you'd have to use the hybrid system for some of these initially. And obviously we'll see batteries improve, and we'll also see technology will improve on the other facets of it as well. But the interesting thing about this product is, you have a mission and a vision as a company, and our vision is the decarbonization and marketization of air travel, and the vision we have, how we imagine the world in the future, is actually quite simple. It's a world that looks like Norway does today. So in Norway, they have 30-seater aircraft connecting, going point to point between small communities. It's the backbone of the infrastructure there. And it's designed like that because Norway has a lot of challenging geography. A small population. It isn't cost efficient to build, road and rail. Something that can be a 20-minute flight can be a 6-hour drive. So the reason that works and is cost efficient in Norway is that it's subsidized by about 40% by the Norwegian government. By going electric, the value is not only in decarbonization, but it's also that you reduce the cost of operating, because electric motors are very simple. They're maintenance free. Battery energy is cheap. It's predictable. So you end up with a product much like electric cars, where you have the sort of use cost of it is much less. So it's just the operating economics for airlines, and it means that whilst jet engines are really terrible at flying small planes, short routes, electric aircraft are really good at that.
And so that's the segment that you're hoping to move into. And it's a segment that's lost market share in recent times.
So I mean, we started we started really with the focus in the Nordics. So we started with this mandate that was given by Norway where they said they wanted to decarbonize all of that traffic by 2040. And we were the only ones building something for that. Then we ended up getting in contact with United Airlines and Mace Airlines, which is one of their regional sort of partners that fly United Express. And we asked them, do you fly a lot of turboprops? Do you have that market like in Norway? And they said, no, we have nothing like that. We don't fly any turboprops, but we used to. So if you go back to the 1990s, we operated hundreds of these aircraft as serving hundreds of communities that have since lost service. And he did not stop flying these things because the aircraft didn't fly far enough. That was not the issue. In fact, the average distance flown by a 30-seater in the 1990s in their network was about 172 miles, which is, well within the range of our hybrid system. And a lot of those flights, maybe, up to half of them, probably, within the 125 mile that we can fly all electric. So they started just pulling up the road route network, and they started identifying the flagship routes, and realized that they have over 100 different routes that they want to open up with this, and ended up writing an order for 100 aircraft from United and 100 aircraft from Mesa, which was remarkable for us.
And because you had that era of shorter haul, and the infrastructure of the airports is still there, as I understand.
So the U.S. is quite remarkable. It has 5,000 airports. So in Norway, there's about 50 airports. In the U.S., there's 5,000. And they were all, built, basically, commissioned, subsidized, still there, still operational, but about only 500 of them are actually seeing any commercial use whatsoever. And only about 200 of them have about 99% of the traffic. So you're seeing this vast infrastructure, 5,000 airports, and actually like 98% of the population lives within 30 miles of these airports. Like even here in LA, we're surrounded by airports. Hawthorne Airport is the closest one to where we are here, but it's only like the large airport like LAX that are seeing traffic. So we think that this is a massively underutilized infrastructure, and that it's being kept open. That has basically, we need to put charging in place, but we have all the what we need to start flying from these places. And that's what really excites us, right? Like we can start building this infrastructure that's almost parallel, that works on these 99% of airports that see no traffic today.
But there must be a reason why there was that consolidation, and
Yeah.
I'm guessing it's to do with the cost of running jet.
Yeah. I mean, the large factor was that, the jet engine it sucks at two things. First of all, we never really solved commoditization or mass production of jet engines. So they're still, highly expensive pieces of machineries with a lot of advanced manufacturing, a lot of moving parts, and they cost virtually the same if you put them on a 70-seater or a 30-seater. So you kind of, in the game in aerospace, is you kind of want to make sure you're amortizing the cost in a large number of passengers. And they also wear the same whether you fly 100 miles or 1,000 miles, because it's the thermal cycle of the engine when it sort of heats up and contracts when it's being used that is wearing it, and that's what's driving maintenance. And then it's very inefficient for taxi. For these routes we're talking about, 10% of the fuel can be spent in taxi. Very noisy in taxi, polluting a lot. Takeoff and landing is also not. It is sort of the ideal operating point for these things. So for these short routes, they are per passenger kilometers are about twice as bad.
And there'd be local opposition, I imagine, in some pockets,
Yeah,
because of the noise and because of the pollution, as you mentioned.
Noise, pollution, runway requirements. So obviously, when you bring this, you drastically reduce noise. You operate it from shorter runways, and you'd have zero local pollution, which means that it's much more. I think residents obviously see a value of having connectivity as well. So that equation changes.
And I guess from an economic development perspective as well, it's going to open up opportunities for communities to be able to develop around an airport hub and attract business and kind of, as you say, democratizing this form of transport out from just the hubs, which seem to command so much resource.
Yeah, I mean, like connectivity and infrastructure, I think it's been how we define our civilization. I mean, the first cities were built by the rivers, right? And then it was important to be by the rail tracks and by the interstates. And now if you want to be in a competitive place, you have to be close to it.
Yeah.
To airport connectivity. I mean, it's as important for your business as being connected to the internet, right?
But okay, so the vision is really clear, and there's some territories like the US where you've got infrastructure that could be brought back.
Yeah.
But talk to me a bit about the economics at the moment, because of course you've got this high capital cost of bringing a new airplane into production. I mean, how long is it going to take before you think the economics are going to be in your favor?
Yeah, I mean, so that is the challenge, is to sort of, bringing an aircraft through certification is the thing that you sort of have to amortize. We've been fortunate enough to receive these orders. I mean, we have orders and LOIs for like 500 aircraft, and in the aircraft industry, that's a lot, and that's enough to sort of amortize the cost. But obviously, it's getting over that hurdle of certification.
But those orders must have had a price point, or is it's not a price check?
Yeah. Of course, yeah. And meeting that price point is, we feel pretty confident that we can do that. Actually, looking at what's happened in the industry also over the past decades is that we've seen digitalization happen, a lot of commoditization of subsystems. So there's there's been a slew of technology like chips and electronics that have been developed from the automotive car industry, the autonomous car industry, that has the kind of high integrity, fail-safe modes that we need, that are now being introduced to the aerospace
and
industry.
really sophisticated controllers and mechanisms that.
So I mean, if you think about it, you've seen like how drones have come in and shown how like this market can really be commoditized, and you have, some things on a small consumer drone that are more advanced than what's on your passenger aircraft that's flying. So it's really about taking that technology and then sort of getting it through the sausage machine of certification of aircraft.
So you got your order book from United and
Yeah.
others, which is excellent. As I understand it, they just approached you through your info at email.
Oh,
is that
yeah.
right?
This is one of those stories that I think was just Clara, who's my wife and founded the company with me. She just came to me one day. It's like, I got this email. It was in the spam. I don't know if it was. I think it was in the spam filter. And she was like, "Is this legit or not?" And we're like, "Okay, we'll set up a call and see." And it ended up, becoming writing this large order,
Yeah.
becoming investor in a round that was led by Breakthrough Energy, which is the climate fund that was founded by Bill Gates. So that was a pretty good.
And you were sitting in your Y Combinator startup, right?
Yeah. So
During that period?
this was actually, we were back in Sweden. This was for our Series A. So yeah, but we were so focused on the Nordics, and then we get one of the world's largest airlines and arguably one of the leaders on this transition coming in and backing.
So they've given you that good, you've got a kind of buyer, which is super important. It tells you that you've got a good product market fit. But where are you going to scale up this operation? Because US and Europe, very different markets.
Yeah.
You're a Swedish-US hybrid now.
Yeah. So we started very locally because we had a lot of early funding and support from the Swedish government, and we had these orders from SAS and Bra and Vidare, which we still are some of our key partners. But then we've seen, as we've grown, this sort of local niche product where we started has had this global appeal. And again, they're very complementary because Norway is very forward-leaning, but it has 1% of the airports that are here in the U.S. And this is the largest aircraft or largest market for airspace in the world. And it's also, has some of the best talent in the world for development. And really we have all those puzzle pieces for building a truly revolutionary product. And the one thing that would obviously attract us to, we're here today in El Segundo in this sort of new aerospace ecosystem. And we have a lot of sort of SpaceXers working with this. And we really want to do for aerospace what SpaceX did for launch, which was, looking at bringing in commoditized systems, building a vertically integrated product, a new paradigm in how you approach product development, which is more about like a fast iterative. It's called like iterative product development, where
or move fast and break things.
Yeah, move fast and break things is you have to be a little bit careful, but when you're building aerospace product, but actually testing things towards failure is something that ultimately results in a better product. We're just not going to do that when we're flying it.
No. And tell me a little bit about that process of innovation and your philosophy, because I know you've been highly influenced by another Swede who moved to the US.
Yeah. So, well, actually, yeah. So one of our big heroes is obviously Kelly Johnson. He's a Swedish. He was born in the U.S., but he was from his parents were from Malmö in southern Sweden, and he lived close to where I live.
Now in LA.
Yeah, now in LA, and he headed the Lockheed Skunk Works that built some of the most remarkable aircraft. And this idea of a skunk work has, become a thing now, but it was actually just like their word for this special forces kind of small team. And he was basically saying, like a small team of kind of 10% of an average size organization, but highly skilled engineers can be more efficient, right? Like instead of having the army, you have the sort of Navy SEALs, if you will. And then he lists these things, simplicity, iteration, a full control of the process by the managers, responsible engineers, and these things, came from the aerospace industry and actually were very influential when the software industry created their sort of working practice and their ethos for development.
Lockheed Martin was a sort of Bay Area company.
Yeah. They were based in the Bay Area, where they sort of spawned some of their work on
perhaps famously the Blackbird.
The Blackbird, which is just a remarkable aircraft. And
not very practical though.
It's
beautiful engineering.
Beautiful engineering, yeah. I mean, it's really something like was built in the future, but it's 50 years old plus, right? But Yeah, well, so that's why it's so interesting when you're like in aerospace and people are saying, you know what, you're trying to do something, people are not doing it this way, you know, like it's impossible to do it this way. And you just have to look back at your storied past and realize that, you know, like for instance, all of commercial planes today, they kind of look the same. And the archetype for that is the Boeing 367, which then became the Boeing 707 and formed the basis for all Boeing aircraft. And, you know, still being, you know, the platform of which they're building their narrow bodies. And it was built in like the span of 2 years by a team spending about $200 million in today's money. And, you know, they didn't have computers, they didn't have the analysis tools that we had. And so there's always, when we talk about like the way we want to approach this, it's forward looking, but it's also looking back at the storied past of aviation.
And I find that really interesting because, you know, the Boeing has not had a really good run of late, right? So they have this core design that was, you know, from the 50s, which they've iterated around, but it hasn't necessarily meant that it's been any safer or there haven't been safety issues, which is kind of curious, right? You'd think the reason they locked down was to try and create fewer uncertainties.
Yeah.
But then recently that doesn't seem to be working.
Yeah, I mean, I you know, I want to be a bit careful, but I would say, you know, certainly since that introduction of that aircraft, we've really improved safety, and we haven't had, you know, the safety record for air travel in the US at least is stellar. But it becomes an issue when the currency in basically if you haven't built, it's 17 years now since a clean sheet design was produced by Boeing, and it's looking to be the late 2030s before they're actually going to do something else. So the industry is in this dilemma where in order to sort of motivate building a new aircraft program, you need to have a 20% better fuel efficiency than the last one. That's always been the name of the game. And we're hitting the practical limits of actually being able to achieve even a modest improvement in fuel efficiency from jet engines. And that's been the name of the game for the last, you know, 50 years. We've seen jet engines have doubled in efficiency. So that's been feeding the industry and feeding the new programs and sort of creating the circulation in the system, keeping engineering competence current. But now that's stopped. And people don't really know where to go. And we're at a place where the incumbents now, both Boeing and Airbus, are saying they're not going to have a new aircraft until the late 2030s because they need this step change in technology. That means that new aircraft are not being built, and that engineers are losing their currency in how to operate that. So we're approaching a 30-year innovation cycle, which is remarkable. I mean, it's
remarkable in a bad way, right? Because that's a whole generation, someone's working lifespan where you might not see iteration into a new design.
I mean, imagine if you sort of launched the first iPhone in 2007 and you said, "Great work, team. Let's do the next one in 2037."
Yeah.
Like there wouldn't be anybody would not be around, right? Like, so all the knowledge has been sort of lost. Like when you're building technology, you're sort of running up the escalator. The natural state of everything is that knowledge is being lost. You know, the natural state is decay, and you sort of have to move faster than those natural decaying processes to build accretive knowledge.
And it's especially true, I imagine, in highly engineered technology like aviation, where you can't really read a book or you know, you need to build.
I mean, if you're at a company and you know, if the percentage of your workforce that has actually first-hand experience of building and designing new aircraft is becoming increasingly diminished, can you really say that the company has a competency to do that? You know, we obviously are good at documenting in this industry and writing down our processes, but it's I think a fallacy to assume that just because you have, you know, a vault full of documentation somewhere that somebody just can go in and sort of take up where somebody else left off.
Cleaning Up is brought to you by the members of the Leadership Circle. That's Actis, Alcazar Energy, Ecopragma Capital, EDP of Portugal, Euroelectric, the Gilardini Foundation, KKR, National Grid, Octopus Energy, Quadrature Climate Foundation, SDCL, and Wärtsilä. For more information on the Leadership Circle, please visit cleaningup.live. That's cleaningup.live. If you're enjoying Cleaning Up, please make sure that you subscribe on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. That really helps other people to find us. Please recommend Cleaning Up to your friends and colleagues and sign up for our free newsletter at cleaninguppod.substack.com. That's cleaninguppod.substack.com.
We are here in LA, and on the other side of the country, we've got President Trump, who now taking occupancy in the White House.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably very early days to be making any kind of projections about what this will mean.
Yeah.
But how are you viewing this at the moment?
No, I think that well, we're also obviously in a place where we've lost large parts of the city to a large wildfire, where climate change certainly played a role, and we're in the heels of the hottest year on record, and I think that the political dynamics are going to be changing and oscillating all the time. Unfortunately, the wider trend is going to be that climate change is going to be even more real and more urgent, and so how do you deal with that? I think, well, you try to find first of all, build a product that has a negative green premium. I think this is important as essentially,
And let's just unpack what you mean by that. So that's basically saying Bill Gates has this phrase of the green premium,
Yeah.
but which meaning you're going to have to pay a little bit extra. But ideally, you find the win-wins where the new approach is more efficient and therefore inherently cheaper.
Yeah.
And that's a negative, as in you're going to be saving money once it's developed.
Exactly. Like that's the way. I mean, and then so, sort of clean tech sort of incentives can be really important because they can catalyze a lot of this development and has for us in the past. But ultimately, you want to build a product which combines ecology with economy that has a better economic performance than the thing that you're replacing. And like where electrification goes in, that happens everywhere, like in cars and bikes and everywhere. But also, our mission is to decarbonize and democratize. So while the green aspect is one of it, but it's also restoring connectivity to communities that have lost service. And in our the time we spent in DC, we see that this is resonating across the aisle, right? Because people want to restore connectivity to their home communities. And finally, I mean, I think aviation is, I think, one of the most greatest example of American ingenuity. It's the
the Wright brothers.
The Wright brothers and
exactly.
everything, right? It's the core of the national identity and the engineering pride. And obviously, we want to keep the U.S. as being the global leader in developing this.
It was interesting on my way here. I decided to come down from San Jose to LA. I took the bus because I thought, right, I'm going to see what it's like to do this without driving myself in an electric car. And in the bus station or the train station, they've got this little exhibit of times past where San Jose was investing in infrastructure.
Yeah.
And there's this wonderful advert of trying to get people to vote for basically say yes to a new airport in San Jose. And the phrase is let's get San Jose out of the buggy and cart era, get us into the modern day. And then next to that is a little pamphlet about the high-speed rail. And it's so interesting that high-speed rail really has not succeeded in the US context, whereas aviation did. And there was this era of this was modernity as defined, in the American dream, really, much more so than trains.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, but I'm going to say something maybe controversial, but I think despite of all the success of aviation and this, like, it's a tremendous, obviously this $1 trillion market, it's still a niche product. Like it is not really lived on up to the expectations that was set. Like Henry Ford started building the Ford Trimotor aircraft because kind of thought that cars would not have a role in the future. Why would you when you can fly and go much faster and go straight? So, but still we're at a place where most people only use planes.
Well, and it's highly
Yeah.
divisive in the sense that, on my bus, that it's obviously affordable to all,
Yeah.
to a much wider swathe of society to get on a bus. To get on an airplane feels still somewhat out of reach for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And maybe that, that is because the core product is necessarily quite expensive to run, right, with the fuel and the...
Yeah, I mean, but I don't think we're anywhere close to where we could be with that. So, and the interesting thing about operating, when you look at that, and we talk a little bit about the decline of regional aviation, and people think to see that this is just sort of natural convergent evolution. It's this highly random process that is highly nonlinear, which means that in aviation we have, especially like in the design of aircraft, we have these snowball effects. Like for instance, if you're designing a plane and you make the engine a little bit more efficient, you can make a little bit smaller wing, and that means that you can, the whole weight of the aircraft goes down, and then you can suffice with even a smaller engine, and then you get these virtuous circles, and then you have the negative sort of vicious cycles that are happening where things quickly become less and less valuable. And I think it's true for how we design aircraft. It's also true for how air travel works for the infrastructure.
And now there are other ways in which aviation is benefiting from improvements in material science, or just we hear about maybe just the way that we cover the plane is a factor in terms of drag, and I guess there are all these innovations coming.
Yeah, I mean, I think that so in a car, or say a plane like ours, weighs roughly the same as a Tesla Semi, an electric truck. It carries roughly the same amount of batteries. It has the same system voltage. It has the same power electronics. We're going to be using a lot of the same components, but the sort of cost for a plane versus something like that is 2 orders of magnitudes higher. So, which means that there's so much opportunity to bring these costs down. It's not that the materials itself are expensive. It's just that the refinement of those materials, take a lot of engineering hours, which means that it's another way of saying that that aerospace is a technology product, just like software, just like electronics. It's not actually the core cost of materials that is driving the cost of the product. It's the cost of engineering. That means also that a sort of a software-centric or a sort of Silicon Valley ethos to designing these products can be highly effective.
Okay, so this is all in the context of the short-haul industry, and as you envisage it, that the kind of bringing that back. But what about long-haul? You've got a great academic history of working right the way through from space propulsion.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the long haul? Because there will be a limit, right?
Yeah. I think that as we go bigger, and we share this on our roadmap, we're looking at going to a 100-seater afterwards, and we think that short haul will go more and more all electric as batteries improve, and also but the technology with the hybrid technology can then scale to larger aircraft, and it's really not like the physics are not really setting the limits. It's more like the practicality of the systems and how they are synergies you can get with automotive development. But with a 100-seater is next for us. That's going to be hybrid electric. And ultimately, about 1/3 of emissions are coming from routes that are under 1,500 kilometers. That's 1/3, because it's like 75% of flights. Whilst, like for really long haul, that's, SAF and these things are going to play.
So sustainable aviation fuel would be your bet for the really long haul.
Yeah, I would say it's going to be a combination of this entire of different technologies, but but at the same time, the technologies that we're developing, there's a role for hybrid system in any kind of engine if you combine it with other things, because it's just a way of building better efficiencies. There's a role for redefining how we build our architectures of our aircraft to make them overall lighter. And if this one thing that we know about SAF is obviously that it's going to be more expensive than jet fuel. So anything we can do to make sure that we get more out of each drip of it is going to be obviously critical to making that play work.
So there will also be a hybridization of those long haul flights.
Yeah, I mean, we've actually seen, like, even for the Dreamliner and the A350, there's this thing called more electric system, where the non-propulsive parts of the engine, like mechanical system, have been replaced by electrical. Hydraulics has been replaced by electrical, and that's also creeping into the propulsion system. Obviously, the gain is better the shorter the flight.
So obviously there is still a bit of a debate around the alternative to fossil-based fuels, because you've got sustainable aviation fuel, which is coming from a process of creating from a biomass source, by and large. And then you've got another version, which is sort of hydrogen, green, blue, hydrogen. What are your thoughts on hydrogen in the aviation sector?
Well, I think that hydrogen is, well, first of all, I think everybody that's working with any solution in aviation sector should be applauded, right? And we definitely don't have the silver bullet for everything, and there's a lot of unknowns. I think our focus, our gravitational towards hybrid electric is that it's technology that is a known entity, that is working today. There's certified all electric aircraft. There's a great, we understand the safety. We can design around that, and we can build a product that has this negative green premium. I think it's much harder to say that for hydrogen. Basically, if you want to create hydrogen out of electricity, your conversion rates are just so bad that, like, you're sort of hit with the loss of thermodynamics. If you want to actually build a product, you're going to be at 5x, 10x more expensive than a battery electric. And
this is true even though the density, theoretical density of the fuel is higher.
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously dependent on what aircraft you're talking about, what the route length they're talking about. And I think the hydrogen electric aircraft could fly theoretically farther than battery electric aircraft. But for any route that you could fly battery electric, you'd want to fly battery electric. But yeah, so that's that. And then obviously there's the discussion of, is it really if you're using hydrogen, like, why not just go for SAF? Or, like, if it's going to be an expensive way to build up that infrastructure, why not use something that is more a known entity when it comes to you don't have to redesign your entire plane and your infrastructure.
And I guess there's also, if we are electrifying ground-based transport at pace, there's already a sustainable fuel blend that's going in, certainly in Brazil, at these very high levels of ethanol going blended into the road transport fuels. I presume with the ethanol subsidies in the US, there's also ethanol that could be freed up as we electrify. So is there a kind of, can you see a point at which the SAF fuels are abundant enough that they can come down in price?
Yeah, I mean, I'm nowhere. I'm actually, I mean, I'm not an expert in SAF, so I don't want to speak with that much authority, but I think there's, I agree with what you're saying, and I guess our marching orders is just to do everything we can to improve the efficiency by introducing hybrid system. Means that, like, you're acting as a force for good. I think in general, we talked about this before, like the whole crystal ball exercise that people are doing. People are saying, we're going to be somewhere in 2050, and that's 25 years away. When I started this company, it was 30 years away. Like, whatever you're going to be predicting for 30 years away, you're going to look like an idiot. Your long-term vision should not, like, that should always be matched with a short-term action, because whatever we're assuming the technology look like, we're going to be wrong. So we got to put ourselves on a trajectory of educating ourselves and improving ourselves. And that process is by doing and building. So in order to be somewhere by 2050, like, in order for us to reach the finish line by 2050, we need to at least have made the first big leap by the end of this decade.
And that's exactly what you're focused on right now, isn't it? Tell us a little bit about your test flight that's coming up.
Yeah, I mean, our aircraft, 6 years into the company, where we're sitting here, behind is our first flight test demonstrator. It's a full-scale aircraft. It has a 106-foot wingspan. It's the largest battery electric aircraft ever to fly by a large margin, and it's clean sheet. You know, we're going to be flying this within the first half of this year.
And how long will it be before you yourself, the inventor, might be able to step onto a plane, your own plane?
Yeah, I mean, I'm having those discussions with my wife.
You're not going to do the Orville Wright thing where you're actually there on the test flight?
Unfortunately, you know, people ask me if I'm a pilot. I'm more of a builder than I am a pilot. But I think, you know, it's a real. But yeah, maybe the next iteration after this one, I can get a you know, get the jump seat.
And so before we end, I really wanted to just also ask you a question about Sweden, because here you are, this inventor who's come out of Sweden, now in LA, following in the footsteps of you know, Kelly Johnson, as we talked about. But there's another very famous Swede, Greta Thunberg, who, amongst, you know, many things she's achieved, she's a wonderful, kind of wonderful person. She did, I think, get involved in this Swedish concept of the flugskam.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what flugskam is?
Yes. So, I mean, before I did this company, I was a researcher and I was leading the Swedish, this thing called leading Swedish project on electric aviation. And the first time I went to Parliament to speak, this is in 2018, Greta was sitting outside Parliament. She started her protest that week, and she was in the local news. And I sort of took note of that as I sort of walked past and got into it, and I thought it was sort of a cool thing she's doing, and that kind of blew up after that. You know, she became the Time Person of the Year the very next year, and part of it was obviously when she traveled over to the U.S., she took a boat across the Atlantic just to show really how you know, aviation is a cause for our emissions, right? And I think we should. Obviously, like we should applaud that sort of incentive. We saw also that actually it was the regional aviation in Sweden, because of the flight shaming, this idea of you should not take an aircraft, it went down about 12%. In Germany, similar number, and it sort of caused these snowball effects that we're still kind of the industry is reeling from. Do
you think it was that, or is it really COVID and fuel prices?
It was just pre-COVID, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, this is pre-COVID.
Pre-COVID, it was a 12% downturn, and yeah, obviously that matters a lot for an industry that has very, very tight margins. But yeah, I mean, to me, I know this is an impossible choice. Like, if you want to make between you know, climate. If you have to make the choice between, you know, flying and traveling, I think just air travel is such a net good for our civilization. It's what brings us together. It's what, you know, opens us up to new experience. It is the antidote to many of the trends that we're seeing in society that we don't like. I think that there's nothing that compares to going places, right? Like, you can't believe that the internet or media or something like that will make you understand the world, like, you know. So I mean, to me, my passion for travel is actually much even bigger than my passion for planes. But it's just such an important thing for our understanding of the world, which is, you know, what we need to stay together as a civilization.
I think that's a lovely point. I do think there's this feeling, though, that it's been a luxury that the elite have had access to, and that a large number of miles flown are by a very, very small percentage of people, and it's that feeling that this is not democratized currently. This is an elite activity that only a few benefit from, and that's I'm sure at the heart of the flugskam is this feeling of injustice. Yeah.
But I mean, I've traveled around. So today it's only about 20% of the world's population has been on an aircraft once, and we got 6 billion people that are looking to be connected to this infrastructure. and that's driven largely by the emerging middle-income countries of Asia, right? So when India, we're seeing constantly like record sales of aircraft going into India. It's going to be probably India and China are going to be the largest market, and so that becomes the backbone of their connectivity. And what's been remarkable about aviation is that yes, there's a portion of people that fly a lot, and I'm one of them. But obviously, it's become accessible and affordable for
a wider group, even if it's not everyone.
Yeah, a wider group, even if it's not everyone. And it's remarkable how much cheaper it is, for instance, than taking the train.
Yeah, but I mean, both India and China, and maybe we should talk a little bit about China, have invested hugely in rail. I mean, Chinese high-speed rail system is the envy of the world now. Is there a paradox here? Does an over-reliance on aviation mean you underinvest in like we've seen in the US? We've had aviation almost replace the train, and been virtually no investment into that infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's we should never try to sort of put different modes of transport in. I think there's a place and time for different modes of transport. I mean, going to China, going to Japan, the high-speed rails are an excellent way of getting around. They obviously have the population to support that kind of thing. So we need a combination of all of these things. The exciting thing about aircraft is that whilst investments in trains are generally sunk costs that are just, not scalable, if you invest in technology and you could bring those investments into a wider product that you can then export as a technology across the world, which I think is unique about aviation.
Something that I've learned from talking to you actually is that there needs to be a population density to support rail, right? There's a reason why Europe's good at rail, China's good at rail, because it's got these very large population centers that are relatively distributed. But my experience of living in the US for the last 2 years is this is a vast continent that's largely empty with some pretty challenging geographies to navigate. And is that why it's not a conspiracy that it's been anti-rail? It's more just been, this is a hard thing to make it economic.
Yeah, I think rail has just struggled. I mean, it is challenging. Obviously, you need to build and maintain that quite extensive infrastructure. And even in Europe, we've seen, it's highly subsidized, but it's still it's challenged to keep it actually operational, right? But yeah, and obviously the other thing that's beautiful about aircraft is that it is not picking winners and losers, right? We've had this discussion of a high-speed rail in Sweden where it's like, cities are fighting to be on the rail line because they know that it's going to make all the difference in the world, whether or not they're going to have a vibrant city in the future, economically competitive. Whereas aircraft is like this network that can adapt. As long as there's an airport, you don't have to say this is how many planes are going to land there every day. If that city grows organically, the air travel can sort of dynamically support it. And I think that's a real beautiful thing. And it's not.
Yeah, by its nature, it's a small world network, right? Which is flexible.
Exactly.
Yeah, and as you said, I think you said to me that in the US, 95% of the population lives within 20 miles of an airport, which is not. You could definitely not say that's true of any rail infrastructure that's remaining.
So the infrastructure is there; it's being underutilized, and we can set this virtuous cycle in motion. The more aircraft we build, the better. The more routes we can open up, the more connections we can have, the better is the value proposition for the customer. The more we can amortize their technology development. If we set these wheels in motion, these wheels have been moving in the opposite direction for the past decades. But if we can reverse that trend, which I think electrification can be this great catalyst for. We'll just see this accelerating, it will become the self-playing piano.
Well, thank you so much for spending this time with me. I'm wishing you very well with your test flight later this year. And hopefully we'll stay in touch. And,
Yeah, you should come check it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to fly it?
If only I had that pilot license. But yeah, thank you so much. And I look forward to staying in touch.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So that was Anders Forslund, CEO of Heart Aerospace. As usual, we'll put any relevant links in the show notes, and my thanks go to our local videographer, Anthony Paniatoros, Oscar Boyd, our producer, Jamie Oliver, our editor, and the growing number of people who together make the Cleaning Up podcast and Leadership Circle possible. Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed the conversation, and please join us next week for another episode of Cleaning Up.
Cleaning Up is brought to you by the members of the Leadership Circle. That's Actis, Alcazar Energy, Ecopragma Capital, EDP of Portugal, Euroelectric, the Gilardini Foundation, KKR, National Grid, Octopus Energy, Quadrature Climate Foundation, SDCL, and Wärtsilä. For more information on the Leadership Circle, please visit cleaningup.live. That's cleaningup.live. If you're enjoying Cleaning Up, please make sure that you subscribe on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. That really helps other people to find us. Please recommend Cleaning Up to your friends and colleagues and sign up for our free newsletter at cleaninguppod.substack.com. That's cleaninguppod.substack.com.